So here we go. So here's a case example that I picked up from my files a couple of years ago. And perfectly, she was 78. I'm not sure if she was a grandma, but she's definitely 78. She fell on black ice and then she hit a crack. And then obviously she was on the ground, came to us with that x-ray. And we looked at it and decided what we are going to do and kind of gel right in with the topic, right? So we do know there are more total joints all across the country, all across the world, and therefore more periprosthetic fractures. People are definitely more active. We are doing total joints in younger patients. So it kind of, gels together to realize that the incidence is significantly higher. So this is an older study which talks about overall 4%. I think the number may be somewhat higher now with the Australian and the English registries. And what is interesting is that the rate of periprosthetic fractures is obviously higher in revisions. And in the newer studies, they're talking about it being higher in non-cemented total hips. And therefore, they're pushing people to do total hips that are cemented in people who are over the age of 70 or 75. So why does it happen? Well, some of it is just technique, right? Improper reaming or broaching. And if you've taken out a previous fixation device, you're leaving behind stress risers. Revision arthroplasty is obviously way more incidence again because of the previous things, a lot of bone loss. Cement removal might be a problem, loose components which cause bone loss. And then fracture can occur proximally, while well-fixed stem fractures usually occur at the tip. Okay, and then osteoporosis, obviously, these are older people. Everyone's seen this slide. Everyone knows about this classification. I only bring it up to talk about which fractures we are going to fix. And I'm going to skip that. Right. So which are the fractures that we're going to fix? As we said, non-cemented hips have a higher periprosthetic fracture, while in cemented hip, there is higher B-type fractures with the smooth collarless stems. So the big question to answer when you fix these is the stem loose? And I think that's really going to decide how you're going to fix it. Now, whether these patients have pain before this, which is easy, they're very obvious lucency or the stems just floating around. The best thing is obviously have an old x-ray. If you had an x-ray from 6 months ago and then you compare it to the x-ray today and the stem subsided, you know there's a problem. But if it looks identical, so for example, the image here on my right, which shows that the stem is lower, and you would say, well, this stem looks like it's loose, but what if you had an x-ray that showed that exactly same appearance? Then you have to start rethinking it. So as we said, based on the Vancouver classification, the ones that you're going to fix are the ones that have a well-fixed stem or fracture that's distal to the stem. And this talk is we're talking about fractures around the total hip and hopefully around a well-fixed stem. So these are the last two examples that I gave you. And you can see one of them needed a revision because the stem was very obviously loose. And the other one, we went in, we checked it, and turns out that's what the position of the stem was. And this wasn't loose at all. So question is, why do we go from the top? Because according to me, going from below is kind of like this. I didn't even know there was a word called circumbendibus. Did anyone of you guys know it? I didn't know it, but it basically means a roundabout way of going about doing something. So circumlocution, when somebody talks, for example, a comb is follicle redistribution mechanism, right? Or a vermin de-infestation apparatus, which is a fly swatter, and so on and so forth. So why do you want to go from the top? Well, that's where the fracture is, right? It's at the proximal end. You can assess the stem. So you can actually get in the hip joint and look at the stem as opposed to the standard look at the fracture site. Oh, it's not that bad. You can assess the bone stock and fracture, and then you can fix it or revise it at the same sitting because you're already there. Stem stability is a problem. It is often underestimated by us trauma guys, definitely. And the highest risk of fixation failure occurs because of misdiagnosis, right? And then fixation is twice as likely to fail if you do it for B2 versus BN. So this is grandma, this is intrap. We put this plate in, fix the fracture, and that's the whole length. You can see we tried to plate the whole femur, didn't quite make it to the distal end, but thankfully it's working. And she went on to heal it, went at PT, and actually went home, which is kind of nice, right? So that's what it was. So to conclude, I would say, based on what I've said to you guys, I would say I would convince you that the action is proximal, right? So go where the action is, assess the fracture, assess the stem stability, and that's how you're going to get the most optimal outcome. Thank you.